Welcome to the Linux Spotlight. This show is dedicated to showing off the best thing about Linux, our community. This community is made up of developers, distro maintainers, YouTubers, and everyday users. Each one plays a vital role in our community, and the goal is to have a discussion with each individual about their journey into Linux and beyond. So join me now as we turn the spotlight on. Hello, I'm your host, Rocco, and with me today is our special guest, my friend, Tyler Brown. Tyler, how are you?
Time appropriate greetings, Rocco. I'm doing just fine.
I love it. There's a hidden message in that there. People will know.
Definitely.
Tyler, you are, obviously with that, you are a regular member attendee of the Mumble Room on Linux Unplugged. A regular member of Biddle, when work allows.
Right.
A Linux conference guru, we'll say, because you attend everything. But say you were at a Linux conference and somebody came up to you that you didn't know, and they didn't know you, and they asked you, who are you personally? What would you say to them? Who is Tyler Brown personally?
Well, I am a nearly 28-year-old Linux fanatic, coffee lover, and into craft beers.
Nice. We have to get into the coffee thing. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
So for your day job, you work at Amazon?
Yes, I've been working for Amazon for nearly 7 years now. I started out on the floor at a subsidiary and worked my way into the IT department doing frontline IT support, dealing mostly with hardware and software stuff.
Dude, that is so awesome to hear stories like that where people start out somewhere and then they get into the IT department and work their way up. It's fantastic. I love it. What about hobbies, dude? Do you have any other hobbies outside of Linux? I mean, besides Linux conferences?
Yeah, most of my hobbies tend to center around computers and Linux. And if it's not messing with modern hardware, I've taken a liking to playing around with older hardware and operating systems. Right next to me, I've got an old iBook G3 sitting there running iOS, not iOS, Mac OS 9. And I use that to play with old Mac OS 9 software, play old games like Oregon Trail, or loading up nostalgic software like KidPix that I grew up with.
Right.
So
awesome.
Actually, right behind me, I've got it. Well, other side, cleared up an old Macintosh LC3. It needs a new hard drive, but I picked it up when I was in North Carolina last year.
Oh, wow. So how did you come across that at Self? Like, you're at a Linux conference. How you come across one of those?
So my buddies and I, we were down there. We went up to Greensboro, North Carolina to visit a mutual friend that we all have. And one of the things we like doing is raiding thrift stores to find old hardware like that. And went to a Goodwill and ran across the Mac LC3. I already had the monitor for a while, so thankfully I didn't have to find a way to get that back. But I just threw the LC3 into my checked luggage and brought it home with me.
Nice. I love it. That's a great way to get old hardware. Go to the thrift store.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. So you work at Amazon. It's a tech-related field. You attend all of these Linux conferences. Yeah, so it's safe to say that you can easily talk about Linux when you're in those realms. What about your family, friends, people you come in contact with on a daily basis, maybe not at your job? Are you able to talk to them about Linux?
So outside of family, work, and these communities I'm in, I don't really talk about Linux all that often. So I have tried to convince family to switch to Linux a few times over the years. Not truly successful at that. My brothers like to play video games, and so does my mom. And my dad's been working in IT for nearly 30 years, so he's capable of managing his own computers.
Right.
So that's kind of how I grew up around all this stuff. And
Does your dad run Linux?
no, he does not. He actually runs Windows.
Okay.
So
All right.
it's all about the games, right?
It's always about the games, dude. That's like one of the biggest things that people get stuck on, or, well, it's not always about the games, but man, that's a big, huge part. Man, if we
It
could
is a
take that
huge part.
away, it would be great, dude. All right. So we're going to get into Linux. We're going to get into Linux conferences, but we got to start at the beginning. So your first computer, what was it?
Oh boy. So I grew up around computers. My first birthday gift that I didn't really enjoy until later on was a cocktail tabletop version of Mr. Do that my dad acquired from some restaurant or bar. And it's still sitting in this house. It needs repairs, and I'd love to actually work on that one day. There's pictures of me as a baby playing on an old Macintosh SE30. And I grew up around computers, but didn't really get into it on my own until closer to middle school.
Mm-hmm.
And right around then, I was running hand-me-down hardware, old Compacts and Dells with like Pentium 2s and 3s, running Windows XP.
Your dad and you, he obviously put a atmosphere of that in your family. Were you building your own computers, or were these all store-bought computers?
These were all like store-bought or bought out, used off of Craigslist or some other bartering website.
Okay. All right. So you have all these computers that you have gone through, older generation Pentiums and whatnot. When is the first time that you hear about Linux?
I remember reading some of the books that we've had laying around when I was in middle school. There were some Red Hat installation guides, stuff that my dad had around for studying up on his IT job. And really wasn't until the summer before I started high school when I started to get an interest in wanting to try something other than Windows. Getting a Mac was out of the question due to cost. So my next best question was like, what about this Linux thing? I remember seeing these books about Red Hat. And about a week later, my dad hands me this burned CD with Ubuntu 606. And first thing I do is I dive right in and wipe Windows XP, and I've got Ubuntu 606 on my computer, and I don't have any wireless working.
Uh-oh. Oh, no. Well, before you go there, you said that there was, you wanted to try other things besides Windows. Do you remember what, like, brought that on?
It was ultimately a curiosity, just something that wasn't Microsoft. It wasn't long after I switched away from Internet Explorer to Firefox, so I really had that burning curiosity at the time.
So you were finding other software, which led you to find other operating systems as well. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So you had that first experience with Ubuntu 606. I mean, you had no internet, but there had to be some good things about it, right? Right.
So my first experience, the interface was weird. It took a little while to get used to. That was the old GNOME 2 days, but I liked it in a weird way. It's a brown theme. But because I didn't have my USB wireless adapter I had at the time was not working, I really couldn't do much with it. I eventually ended up going back to Windows XP with a new store bought computer I got right before starting high school. And I didn't look into Linux again until about a few months later.
All right. So you have this first experience. What brings it back them few months later? Like what intrigues you again? Like you've already did it once. Why do you decide to go back?
I wanted to try it again and see if I could get it to work. That was the ultimate goal.
So you weren't afraid to jump in and do this. There were no reservations, right?
No, no. I mean, as a high schooler, I had a lot of free time. I just dive right in and see if I could get it working. I eventually landed on digging because these were wireless adapters provided by, was it Bell South at the time, right before they got bought by AT&T. And I remember digging deep into their FTP server or something before finding the Windows drivers files and eventually finding that I could get them to work with Indis wrapper. I used that. So it was about early 2007 when I finally got that working. And I used that for about a month or so before using some allowance money to buy a D-Link adapter that I knew worked on Linux just fine.
All right. So you try it again, you get it working, you finally get it working. How does
Right.
it feel?
It was great. I was finally off of Windows at that point. I mean, not for long, but
Right.
it was fun to actually be able to play with Linux unrestricted because package managers were a thing. I couldn't install software without being able to pull it down from the Ubuntu repositories. Even back in 2006, 2007, you needed to have that internet connection to be able to really do anything with it.
Right. All right. So how long do you stay on it? When do you go back to Windows?
I remember sticking with it for a couple months. And then we switched ISPs, got a new wireless router, and I'm on the opposite end of the house from where the router's installed. And wireless G did not have the best range. So
Right.
it eventually led to that wireless adapter not working for the purpose I bought it for because I couldn't get a good signal. I ended up having to go back to the other adapter. My Indus wrapper trick was not working as well. So for that summer, I went back to Windows XP and maybe played with Vista a little bit, but
Yeah, Vista. How did you get along with Vista, dude?
not as bad as people made it out to be.
Well, it wasn't for me. I did not have a problem with Vista itself. The problem I had was with some of the hardware.
Yeah, I didn't have the best hardware, and I had this free copy of Vista Basic I got from the computer manufacturer from that Windows Ready program that they sent out the free disc to people who had Vista capable machines. And it didn't run that bad, especially after I upgraded the RAM, but I ended up going back to XP in the end.
All right. So we've jumped back and forth a few times.
Yes.
When is it, or is there a time where you make the jump full time to Linux?
I initially made that jump sometime in 2010. So it was about right before I graduated high school. I went all in on Linux, and I was pretty much Linux only for a good year and a half. And that was full time. And about that summer of 2011, I ended up having a partition that corrupted on me, and it was right around the time I was getting into playing Minecraft, and I just had better performance with the graphics drivers on Windows. And at the time, I was just thinking, you know what? I'm just going to boot into Windows for a while.
Right.
But I kept that dual boot.
Kept that dual boot. Do you
Yep.
still run Windows today?
Today, I only keep a small SSD for my ThinkPad for the off chance I might need a tool that runs on Windows.
All right. So what is your, I mean, I know what the answer to this question is, but what is your go to Linux distro and desktop environment for your machines?
Right now, that is Kubuntu with KDE, typically the latest KDE from the Backporch repos. Shout out to Rick Mills on that one.
Yep, absolutely. You were showing off your laptop down itself and your configuration, but you have been a long-standing KDE Plasma user, correct?
Oh, yeah, right around the time Unity came out, I went back and forth between KDE, XFCE, and Unity. And eventually I landed on KDE because I was having a growing interest in distributions outside of Ubuntu. And Unity didn't really translate that well outside of the Ubuntu world. So my next best choice was back then something in the late KDE 4 series because I had switched to OpenSUSE around 2013.
KDE 4 days were rough sometimes, dude.
Especially the early KDE 4 days. It got better towards the end, but Plasma 5 is so much better.
So much better, dude. Yeah, so much better. All right. Now, do you have multiple machines? Because I know that you're in Biddle, you take part in some of the distro challenges. So do you have other machines that you do challenges on?
So, yes, I've got my old Haswell desktop that I will occasionally do a distro challenge on. Not that often because I still got hard drives with files on there that I tend to want to keep the computer up to be able to access.
Can I say that you usually take the KDE challenges?
Do I?
Usually.
It's been a while, so because of my work schedule, but
Yep.
and I've got my old ThinkPad, which is the primary distro challenge machine. And I've got a stack of SSDs that I will do the distro challenges on. I've just got, these are cheap, like 120 gig SSDs that I can get for
Yep.
$20. But
Yep. That is perfect, dude. That is perfect for the distro challenges.
And they're all inland. I get them at Micro Center, but they are perfect for distro challenges. And the ThinkPad is the perfect machine because I could just keep the side where I put the hard drive in off of it and just swap it out as if they're like cartridges.
Yep. Fantastic. So, what is your workflow, dude? Have you set up KDE as far as like a keyboard centric desktop environment, or are you more just you don't really have a workflow and you just have a list of software you like to install?
The primary thing that I'm concerned with is I have a panel up top with my clock, access to a menu or some kind of an overview, and some kind of a system tray and system management tools. And I've got a dock on the left with my application. So basically the typical Unity style layout. So
I have been finding more and more people that do that constantly is make their desktop look like Unity. How sad is it that we don't have Unity anymore?
really sad, but at the same time, with the tools I have in Plasma 5, I can make a better Unity. Latte Dock is absolutely fantastic.
It is.
And KDE's support for things like global menus is fantastic.
Yep. It is. Well, Latte Dock itself makes it because pretty much Latte Dock is the only way in Plasma that you can get a centered clock. Only way.
Well, until 5.19.
What did they do to fix it?
So they're adding flexible spacers similar to what Latte Dock has in the justified mode to allow you to center things in your standard Plasma panel. So that's going to be part of Plasma 5.19.
Very nice. Well, let's hope they act like this same Latte Dock. The justify option is the best part about it. Like you can have flexible spacers, but if you don't have that justify option, man, you're not going to have it in the center. But yeah.
Well, between the justified option and the ability of the panel to actually change color based on the title bar theme that you have with the application.
Yep. So in your area, you have micro centers.
Yes.
I don't have micro centers around me, but I have Best Buys. But have you ever walked into micro center and wanted to install Linux on their computers?
No, I have not gotten that urge.
Come on, dude. Really?
No, I have not. I've had more of an urge to install Linux on school computers back when I was in high school, but not a Best Buy.
Did you ever do it?
No, I did not. But I did have a teacher that installed Ubuntu on a couple computers through Wooby.
Ubi, yes, I do
Yes.
remember that. Oh yeah, that's actually what I installed the first Ubuntu on. So, yep. All right, let's get into some Linux conference talk. Your favorite subject,
Oh
because I
yeah.
think you attend every Linux conference in North America, right?
Well, a good chunk of them, as much as I possibly can.
If there was a record to be broken for Linux conferences, you would probably have that record. But in seriousness, what drives you to make all of these trips across the country to go to all of these Linux conferences?
I mean, clearly the swag, right?
Clearly.
No, it's well, the first time I went to a Linux conference was back in 2014. And what drove me to go to the Linux Fest Northwest in 2014 was to meet the Jupiter Broadcasting crew. The next one I attended was 2015, and that was in my own backyard, Kansas Linux Fest. The first one was in Lawrence, Kansas. That's where I met people like Ryan Sipes and got involved in my Linux user group here. I didn't attend another Linux conference until 2017 when I went back to Linux Fest Northwest and met up with the Jupiter Broadcasting crew again. Later in 2017, I went to Ohio Linux Fest because my longtime group of online friends decided we're going to use Ohio Linux Fest as an opportunity to meet up with each other for the first time in real life. And that was a blast. After the conference days, we would go play Cards Against Humanity. I attended with one of my longtime friends from Louisville, Kentucky. It was a blast. And one of those friends and I did the same thing in 2018 when I attended Southeast Linux Fest for the first time.
Yep.
Yep.
Well, that is one of the best things about the conferences is just meeting people that you talk to every day and you get to meet them. I mean, geez, when we went down the South, not only did we get to meet and talk to each other, sit down, have coffee, breakfast, and everything else, but
Yep.
on the way out, we sat in the airport, me, you, and Zeb, for how long? Just
That
waiting for our
was
flights and just
3,
talking.
4, 5 hours. That was a fantastic experience. And that was
It-
after back at the hotel, I helped Zeb with a wireless issue on that tablet he had.
so, picture at this hotel, we're in the room, we're in the bar eating section area, and we're at this table, and it's me, Zeb, Tyler, and there was somebody else there, I think, too, and I can't
I
remember
think
who it
it
was.
was one of my friends, either Luke or Sean.
And we're all just concentrating on trying to fix this issue, and it was great. It was a great time.
Yeah, it was fantastic. 'Cause as I was able to just do a quick Google search and eventually like, oh, hidden right in the Mint forums. It's like, oh, you need this firmware file and you need to import it. So I threw it on a flash drive, sent it over to that tablet and ran a couple commands and he was able to get it to work.
Yep, that's what you call real-time tech support, dude. But earlier, before you fixed it for him, earlier in the hallway track, there were guys working on it. I was there, and one guy said, "Hey, let me try it," and it was just a constant thing the whole weekend, and we finally figured it out, or I should say, you finally figured it out. But
Right before we all flew out.
yep. All right. So, what about the differences between the conferences? You've been to many, so how does, say, Self compare to Linux Fest Northwest?
Linux Fest Northwest definitely feels bigger. It's got that Jupiter Broadcasting backing, so you get those fans that want to fly in every year and do a massive meetup. Last year, we had there was this massive cookout right outside the college at Chris's RV, and they ended up running out of food. They had to bring pizza in. They were expecting it based on the meetup page to be this small meetup, and turns out someone inside the conference after the raffle announced, "Oh, yeah, someone outside is having a cookout," and turns out to be over 300 people.
Oh my gosh.
And
Wow.
later in the night, it quieted down and took a turn for the crazy. You know, people getting some drinks in them.
Yeah. Yeah, it can do that. So what about the differences in something like those type of conferences like Self to the smaller ones like Kansas or even down to your local lug?
So comparing that to something like Kansas Linux Fest, at Kansas Linux Fest, there's definitely less corporate feel, and there's more of that tight knit community, especially between the locals that are coming, because you don't really have a lot of people flying from out of town to attend Kansas Linux Fest or even Texas Linux Fest, which I went down to last year.
And how was that?
Texas Linux Fest was a blast. Again, not as big as something like Linux Fest Northwest, but you still had plenty of people coming down to meet the Jupiter Broadcasting crew and Linux Academy crew. So it was fun. Not to mention, it's fun getting to try Texas barbecue and comparing it to the clearly better Kansas City barbecue.
Wow. Wow. Shots fired. So, have you ever been to Scale?
Scale is one of the Linux conferences that I have not been to yet. The idea of attending a conference in Southern California has kind of eluded me because it is a bit more expensive to stay at hotels and attend conferences down in that part of the country.
Right.
I've been able to do Linux Fest Northwest on a shoestring budget a couple times because I've been able to get cheap direct flights through Alaska Airlines between Kansas City and Seattle. And I've
Right.
been able to room with people every year. I've been able to make Ohio Linux Fest in South multiple times because I'm able to stop in Louisville halfway and meet up with friends.
Well, hey, man, that is something that I would love to make certain trips. Like Linux Fest Northwest is something I would love to do one of these years. And obviously, um, you know, it got canceled this year. Um, I don't know. Scale is something that just seems out of reach, dude. It just seems like it's. I know that it's not, but it just seems like it's
It
out of
feels
reach.
like it definitely. I mean, I'm halfway in the middle of the country, and it feels like it's out of reach to me. So
Yeah.
I feel you there.
Yep. Well, maybe one of these days I'll get there.
Next year, it's looking like for any of these conferences with current events.
Yep.
But there's some new conferences popping up next year from some of the rumblings I'm hearing about.
What are you hearing?
I'm hearing that there's a possibility of a Linux Fest occurring in Denver, or at least early rumblings about that.
Really? That would be great.
Oh,
That's a
yeah,
place I would love to go as well.
that would be fantastic.
Visit System 76, dude.
Yep, 8-hour drive from Kansas City,
Yep. That would be great. I think that'd be awesome. You talked about swag earlier, so you got something for us?
So between these, let's see, first, these challenge coins I showed earlier, I got three of these, but two of them to show off at the moment. Two of them I actually got from ordering the Linux Action Show shirts back in the day, and then one they were giving away at Linux Fest Northwest as the prize for answering a question in the IRC channel.
Really?
Yep, I think that was last year. And then, but not only that, I over the years going to all these Linux conferences, I have a growing sticker collection, and I just have an entire box dedicated to stickers that I've collected over the years. Just because you go into these booths and they're all giving away stickers.
Yes. Yep. I seen that down itself, and even as they were leaving, that's like the last thing they take off the tables. So you would
Oh
see all
yeah,
of these empty tables, and there would still be stickers laying there. There you go.
yep, got
It's a great
this.
sticker.
Yep. And then I remember getting handed this by Ryan a couple years ago.
Yep.
And just yeah, I just got a whole bunch of Jupiter Broadcasting stickers, bunch of different Linux projects, Ubuntu, SUSE, oh shoot,
What else you got in that box?
pfSense,
There you go.
got vintage Linux Fest Northwest from 2014, Jupiter Broadcasting.
Oh my.
That was fantastic one. Last year, I went and got a couple of these Ubuntu Studio stickers from Eric.
Yep.
He pointed out that if you put two of them next to each other, they look like a reel-to-reel. This one would make Nate happy. Got the
There you go.
YAST logo. I actually got one of those on my Galago. And then, get hardware. I got my Threadripper sticker in here.
Right?
SUSE.
That's fantastic. Nate would love that, dude. He
Yep.
would just
System
love that.
76. Got some free BSD stuff. Of course, AWS.
Of course.
And then stickers from the different conferences like Linux Fest Northwest, Ohio Linux Fest, Southeast Linux Fest.
Yep.
So, and shirts.
Shirts.
Always love the shirts. So,
absolutely. Awesome. All right. So, but you attend local lugs as well, right?
Yeah, I've been attending the Lawrence Linux user group since about 2015. And I started running the group in 2017. It's had its ups and downs in membership, but we're going to be adding a virtual component to it with the current events that have been going on. We're doing it virtually now to offset the fact that the local library is closed through the next couple months. But once the library opens up and we have our in-person meetings again, I'm going to start bringing a laptop with a webcam and start streaming over something like Zoom or Jitsi and having those meetings that people can join over the internet, especially since we had one person come out all the way from Manhattan, Kansas, which is quite the drive.
Right. So how many
Yeah.
people you think attend on an average?
On average, we typically get about 3 to 5 people.
And is this something that you do? You sit down and you just talk, or is this something you have specific subjects you cover, or how does that work?
We try to get specific topics we cover, but by the time we all sit down, it just ends up we're just talking about random Linuxy things for a few hours.
That's perfect, though, dude. That is great, because that's what it's all about, dude.
Oh yeah, it's all about the Linux.
All right, so you also, again, I mentioned earlier, you attend the Mumble Room religiously on JB for Linux Unplugged. How long have you been listening to JB?
Oh, Jupiter Broadcasting, better part of pretty much a decade at this point. Yeah.
So I take it that you started when they had video?
Yes, with the Linux Action Show, which I would make a point of it to watch every Sunday.
Now, is that something that you miss, the video portion of it, or are you okay with just the audio?
I'm very much okay with just the audio. I missed the video portion when it was a ritual that I would make time out of my day to go watch the live stream and take part in it. But if I'm not taking part in something like that live, I tend to be the kind of person that listens to it during my commute. And that is where I'm very appreciative of the shift to audio only. So I can just pop it on in the car and listen to it while I'm driving to work because I've got a 35 to 40-minute commute.
Right. Well, it's great that they have the audio out there for everybody to listen to. I do still have it in my heart to always love watching the video portion of it, but
Yeah.
it's the way it is. Things move on. So, all right. What about software, dude? Are you this open source guy that will only use open source software, or are you on the pragmatic side of it where you use the best tool for the job, regardless if it's proprietary?
I have a very strong preference towards open source tools, and especially when it comes to things that are core to the operating system, such as open source drivers, which is why I have an AMD graphics card.
Right?
But when it comes to a lot of user end software, I'm not opposed to running proprietary software if it gets the job done.
So the preference is open source.
Yeah, strong preference towards open source.
And I think, I think that's like the perfect way to go about it. Like I appreciate the idea of wanting to run only open source software, but at some point there are times where the proprietary software is better in this specific task, and I think those people should not be made to feel bad if that happens and they need to run a proprietary software.
Yeah, things like I know a lot of people end up preferring Excel because they have decades worth of macros that they've been using, or when it comes to creative software, especially the creative software, people will prefer things like Photoshop or more recently the Affinity Suite.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for a perfect example, we're connecting and recording this on Zoom, which is proprietary software. There are open source software alternatives out there, but they don't offer the feature set that that Zoom offers. And if you're just connecting to somebody and you just want to just connect and you don't need many options, things like Jitsi and certain websites that you can connect to are perfectly fine. But if you need specific things, like for Biddle, we have a waiting room so that you don't just join in immediately. That type of thing. That type of feature. Zoom is the best tool, and that's why we use it.
Oh yeah, Zoom is fantastic. I am not opposed to Zoom. The main reason I'm looking at Jitsi over something like Zoom when it comes to my Linux user group is because we're such a small group, we're not sure if paying that $15 a month is going to be worth it for us right now. So,
Right. And that is and like they have a free version, Zoom does, but the paid version, you only get like I think 40-minute.
yeah, you get cut off after 40 minutes, and our lug meetings are a good 3 hours. So, we really don't want to be having to go over to that laptop and reconnecting to a new Zoom session and trying to get, especially new people to the meeting, reconnected. That's too much of a hassle there.
Yep. Yep. All right. So I started to use Linux back in 2005 or something like that. And I started because of KDE. I started because of, well, not KDE. I didn't start because of KDE. I found KDE and I started looking because of the fact that I couldn't customize Windows.
Right.
And that's the reason that I looked for and then ended up finding Linux. But after so many years, the community to me is the best reason to stay running Linux because it just is. Uh, what drives your passion for running Linux?
It's comes down to the freedom to really make it my own. I'm not really stuck into a specific paradigm like I am in the Windows or Mac world. I can take something like KDE, which with a blank slate looks very much like a Windows desktop, and an hour later have it looking and acting exactly like Unity with maybe some GNOME influence.
So you do. I mean, we've talked before about GNOME and KDE. Which like I know there's things you like about GNOME. There's things you don't like about GNOME. There's things you obviously love about KDE. What are those things that you love about those other desktop environments?
For GNOME, I like the fact that by default it is a proximate layout to what I want. That panel up top with dash dock, I get a dock to the left. If I need something up and running, kind of quick and dirty, I can go with GNOME. It's not 100% the way I want it, but it is really close to what I want. And my favorite feature of GNOME is that activities overview when you hit that super key.
Yep.
It is, you've got the window overview, you've got the desktop switcher, and you've got an application launcher that you can access by just starting to type the application name. It is fantastic. It is elegant. And I wish another desktop had something like it.
Yep. Well, KDE has the full screen dashboard, but it doesn't even
It
compare.
has that full screen application launcher, but it doesn't have the desktop switcher or the application switcher built into it.
Right. So it's more of a menu, just
Yeah.
basically like a full screen menu
Yep.
rather than like GNOME has that workflow is all I can say.
Yep. And I've actually switched away from that full screen menu in Plasma and switched over to the newer simple menu that I think is going to be made default, or if not already.
I am not a fan of the KDE start menu, the default one. I'm just
The
not.
I think it's called Kickoff.
The kicker or kickoff,
It's
one of
being
them.
replaced. I know that much. It's being replaced with something simpler.
I I mean, I have been running KDE. I had run KDE for a long time, and every single time I installed it, that was like one of the first things I would do is remove the default menu and put one of the other menus. They have so many great menus in there, and the simple menu is great. The only downside to the simple menu I found was on multiple monitor setups, where if I had a multiple monitor setup, it would always seem to appear on the wrong one.
So I used to have a multi-monitor setup, and because of limited desk space, I actually went away from it when I got a pair of bookshelf speakers for my desk because I just didn't have the room.
Yep.
And I've found, especially since I've gone to this 34-inch ultra wide monitor, I prefer the single monitor workflow, and I can take advantage of workspaces to get the job done.
Yep. I have so many times thought about diving into workspaces, and I've like kind of sort of started to like look at them, but it's not something that I've ever used and I'm just not used to them. So it's not like a regular thing for me to use the workspaces.
Workspaces, it's that killer feature that I really loved about Linux early on that eventually got added to Mac and then later on Windows. But I just always found that through the different options that we have for the desktop environments on Linux, it's just better on Linux.
Well, I'm kind of forced into the workspace thing now because I used to have multiple monitors and now I only have one because I have the test machine over here. So I only have the one monitor. So it's kind of like I'm just jammed in. Like when like if I'm recording and doing all this stuff, I have 15 windows open. I'm almost forced to use the workspaces. Otherwise, there's just too many layered on top of each other.
Oh, yeah. When I had dual monitors, I didn't use workspaces that much. On my laptop, though, I would use them all the time. When went back down to the single 23-inch, I went back to taking heavy advantage of workspaces. I would have like browser, email, chats, and then kind of miscellaneous.
Yep. So if there was like a feature, like say there was one feature you could take out of Plasma that's not in GNOME and put it in GNOME, or vice versa, what would that be to make each desktop better?
Well, I've already answered this about bringing from GNOME to KDE, but I want that activities overview. I want that analog to it where I have all three of the big components into one tool like it is in GNOME. So that answers that. On as far as bringing something from KDE over to GNOME, it would have to be the Kwin window rules. The Kwin window rules are just absolutely fantastic, and I can do so much with them.
Yep, I agree. But I would also, I mean, I don't know. That might be a tie between that and KRunner, dude. I love
Oh,
KRunner.
KRunner is absolutely fantastic. Like, but back to that discussion about launchers, I remember back in the KDE 4 days, I would still have kickoff kind of for continuity there to have that icon, but I would
Hmm.
just launch everything through KRunner.
And it's gotten so much better over the years where like people don't even realize it because it's not a standout feature. Like they don't promote it anywhere that I see in KDE or the desktop environment or anywhere. But all you have to do is if you're on the desktop, just start typing
Oh
and
yeah, you
it'll
just
pop up. Like you don't have to hit a button, you don't have to hit a keyboard shortcut or anything. Just start typing on the desktop and it starts to come up. You can run terminal commands from there. You can launch applications. You can shut down the computer. I mean, you can do,
calculator, currency
yeah, like,
translators. The only thing that's missing, they had it back in the KDE 4 days, but it never got brought back in Plasma 5. And that's supporting accessing the global menu through KRunner, like
for
but
the HUD.
yeah, the HUD. Yeah, it was the HUD like feature in KRunner. KDE 4 had it, but Plasma 5, it was never brought back in Plasma 5. And I wish it had that.
Well, that brings me back to what we were talking about earlier with when KDE went from 3.5 to 4 and then from 4 to 5. Things Okay, so I loved 3.5 and there were so many good things about it. And then when they went to 4, it was like everything was stripped out. So they stripped out pretty much everything, and like they had a full screen menu in 3.5 and it was Home Run, I think it was called. And it was so customizable. You could customize everything. You could add features to it, add whatever you wanted to it to make it whatever you wanted it to be. And then it did no longer work in 4, and they ended up bringing the full screen dashboard into Plasma, but it's so stripped down and there's nothing you can configure.
I remember using KDE 3.5 very early on in my Linux days. Kubuntu, no, it's actually, I was on Ubuntu 6.10. That was really the first one where I really got it working and kind of dove in. And then I installed the Kubuntu desktop packages on top, and I loved it. It was fantastic. And I used that throughout April until 704 came out. And I don't know why I didn't go back to KDE 3.5, but when I used it, it was absolutely fantastic. And then I remember curiosity kind of bit me, and I played with the early KDE 4 stuff. I liked what I saw from the ideas of the Plasma shell,
Mm-hmm.
but it was very early. It was very buggy. And I remember thinking early on, this would be fantastic for touchscreens with the way you could interact with the plasmoids. You could rotate them. You could get a little menu out so you could move them. And I think that was kind of a long term goal early on, but it never kind of came to fruition until Plasma Mobile.
Well, you just mentioned about how you installed it and it was awesome. Think back, dude, when you were using Windows and then you found Linux, but you found specifically KDE. I remember being so happy. Like, I mean, I remember being so ecstatic, jumping up for joy that I could change anything that I wanted to change. I mean, it was just like a kid in a candy store, dude.
Oh, I had that feeling about both GNOME 2 and KDE 3.5 back in the day. Like even when I went back to GNOME 2 with 704 and 7.10, yeah, I would change everything. I remember late 2007, around November, December, I found this Mac OS 10 Leopard lookalike theme and used that for about a month and then changed it again later on. I never really distro hopped, but I would always play with different themes and change my desktop up.
Yep. I was a Okay, so I've changed over the years. Like I haven't changed my desktop background in I don't know how long, probably, I don't know, 6, 8 months. I used to change my desktop background all the time. Like I would purposely look for programs that would allow me to just click a shortcut button, or like Variety, that would just allow you to go cycle through all of these wallpapers that you picked. I was always changing themes, dude. Always trying out like new ones, and it was very frustrating at times because not all the themes worked all the time. Like there was only certain ones that worked all the way.
Remember, I think the thing that really brought me into Linux and had me loving it was remember on Windows, to really customize it, you had to either replace this hacked file or you had to use something called window blinds that you had to pay for.
Windows blinds was always the I don't know, the holy grail that you never got. Like
Never really got,
I
but
never bought it, but I always wanted it.
I remember playing with it though, and it had some crazy themes like that would even change like the function of your title bar to make it look like. I remember there was one that did like an OS 9 lookalike,
Yep.
which was interesting.
Yes, Windows Blinds was that elusive program that you just at the time you just never had enough money, or at least for me. I mean, I
Right.
just never had enough money to dedicate to buying it. But
Well, and I did some things that I'm not proud of back in the days. So
yeah, yeah, I think we all
yeah,
did at times.
but when I found that on Linux, I could make these customizations, and I didn't have to pay for a third-party tool. It was just the stuff was built in. I went wild with it. I fell in love with it. I used some. Looking back, not the best looking themes, but I used them just because I could.
You are so right. It's funny because you look at these themes, right? And you're like, at the time, they were awesome. And then you look back and you're like, man, that is ugly.
That is so gaudy. Like I remember using one that had like wood grain for the
Yes.
menu bar and toolbars, and then others that did this really weird bubbly Vista look like, but it wasn't exact. It was more like Windows Media Center, and
Yep.
yeah, it's all kinds of crazy stuff. And I remember playing with some of these early docs like Cairo Doc back in the day.
Cairo Doc is, I haven't used it probably. I haven't installed it in, I don't know, 4 or 5 months, 6 months, something like that. But even the last time I used it, it still is really good. It just kind of looks oldish.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but it was really optimized. It was really fast, even on old hardware. I remember that being a thing, but I always stuck with Ubuntu back in the day because I had ATI hardware.
Right.
And back then, the ATI drivers followed the Ubuntu. Well, once it actually got supported, the ATI drivers followed the Ubuntu release cycle. So it was really hard to find much else that wouldn't give me problems. First, I had the integrated ATI chipset. Then I got an HD 2600 XT. And yeah, outside of Ubuntu and maybe early PC Linux OS, I couldn't find much that worked well with it until closer to 2010.
Yep. Well, I'll tell you what. I don't know. Have you ever installed Arch?
I've done it a few times as kind of a novelty, but I never really stuck with it.
I ran an Arch install on my computer and a KDE Plasma Arch install for probably a good 6 months. And it was, at the time, it had broken the record for the longest running distro or desktop environment, whatever you want to call that, on my computer for forever. And it ran great. Now, I ended up messing it up. So there's that. But what I'm saying is that the reason I bring it up is because although there are great setups, like Kubuntu does a great job of kind of fixing some of the defaults in Plasma, there's still something to say about getting a default blank Plasma setup and start to finish going in and having fun messing with it. I'm not saying I want to do that every day. I'm just saying, like, once in a while, that's a great feeling, is to start at a blank screen and then just go and set it up the way you want to.
I mean, there is, especially with how customized my setup is, it's nice to be able to go in and like, how did I do this again? Just to kind of keep my brain sharp. But no, the few times I did the Arch install, I did it to play with. But at the end of the day, I'm just thinking, what advantage does this provide for me over other distributions? And I just couldn't come up with an answer. So I stuck with, at one point it was Ubuntu, then OpenSUSE, then Solus, and now I'm back on the Ubuntu family.
Yep. Well, it is the reason why I run Pop OS. I feel the same way.
Which is a fantastic distribution.
It is, Steve. I'm sorry. It is. No, there's no slight against the regular Ubuntu GNOME when I say that Pop OS is the best GNOME implementation, because Ubuntu GNOME is great, but Pop OS just puts in those little tiny things that will just make it that complete package.
Have you had a chance to play with 2004 and Pop Shell on top of it yet?
I have not, and I so want to, but every time I try to make time for it, there's always something else to do.
So, yeah, it's still early in development. It's got some quirks, but when it works, it is fantastic for a tiling script.
I love it. I can't wait to try it, because that's what intrigued me about i3, partially because, like I said, I downsized from the dual monitors to one. So having a tiling setup, regardless if it's i3 or the Pop OS tiling thing, is very, very, it looks great. It's very appealing to me.
Oh yeah. Now, there's some people in the community that go on. It's like, oh, I don't need extensions for GNOME and that kind of stuff. And they're running these ultra wide monitors. And in my mind, I'm like, how are you running these ultra wide monitors without some kind of extension or script to assist with some kind of tiling.
Definitely tiling is a plus. I do want to try it when it comes out. I can't wait for it to be production ready. But I gotta say that I do have a reservation about trying it on this machine until it is production ready. So,
That's why I've got spare hardware.
yep, yeah, you're right. All right, dude. So let me ask you about the community. You've been a part of the JB community. You've been a part of Biddle. So you've been around for a long time, and you've had to see people, you know, be treated not the best. You've had to see great stories of people treating others with respect and just being plain awesome. How has your experience been on the whole as far as the community itself?
So overall, I've noticed a massive shift in the community in the last 3 to 4 years in a much more positive direction. And I think between like the Destination Linux Network, Jupiter Broadcasting, Big Daddy Linux Live, Linux for Everyone, all
Yep.
these people are creating a far more positive image for the community in these Telegram groups. And every single Telegram group I'm in, I see like the same 20 people talking in them, and it's just fantastic. But in the past, it's not been as great. There has been more toxicity. I remember back in 2007, I was trying PC Linux OS for the first time, and I was having a problem with a application that shipped by default on PC Linux OS. And I went into the IRC channel to get support and then got told, oh, this application is a GTK application and PC Linux OS is a KDE distro, so we're not going to support it. And that left a very bad taste in my mouth because this is in the distribution by default. It's on the ISO, it comes with the installation. So I'm going in the IRC channel expecting support for something that ships with the distribution.
Yep.
Eventually, I found the answer, but it wasn't from the PC Linux OS team at the time.
Right.
And that's not reflective of the community now, but that was 13 years ago.
Well, there have been many stories of good and bad. And you're right. We have gotten better over the years and it just keeps getting better. And I think that if we continue on it the way we are, we never will maybe get rid of all of the bad apples because you're always going to have those. But I think they will be so far and few in between and have such a low voice that I don't think you have to worry about them.
Oh, yeah. And there's also a definite difference in the tone of the community when you're in something like Telegram or Discord versus the older communication channels like IRC. Don't get me wrong, I love IRC, but even a couple months ago, I ran into I was trying to work with some people in the IRC channel, see if someone wanted to work with me on an issue that I ran across, maybe help fix a bug. And then someone else gave me the response, well, because this was a Wayland specific issue, and I was told, why not just use Xorg? I was like,
Right.
I'm trying to help you guys track an issue, and then I'm being told to just use Xorg. So it just makes me feel like my help here is not wanted.
Right. Yep. I think that and that goes for both sides. I think it's the community and the people behind
Hmm.
code doing the coding and everything. I think we all are learning together and getting better at the same time because you see distributions like MX and Endeavor OS, and you could go down the list. All of them are making a real effort to connect with the community and be better at communication. I think we're in an awesome time for Linux right now.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So, do you do any coding or scripting, Tyler?
I That's an aspect I never really got into, never really got into development, and I maybe wrote like one bash script 6 years ago. So yeah, not really my realm of expertise.
Right. Well, okay. And, people who, some people will feel that they can't contribute because they can't code, but you just showed, by your responses before of you were trying to help find bugs in Wayland. And these are the ways that you can contribute if you're not a coder or whatever. Um, what do you think we can do better to help people see that they don't have to be a coder to help out?
I think we really need to work on the accessibility of what it requires to report a bug. And I say this as I run, like, if I test a distribution and I run into a bug, I don't, the biggest barrier for me is I don't want to sign up for 10, 20, 30 different bug trackers for something I might only be testing for a week on some of these challenges. So, like, I'll be on Launchpad with Ubuntu because I have this single sign-on back from when I was on the Ubuntu forums, and there are a couple other bug trackers like the KDE bug tracker that I'm signed up for.
Yep.
But if I run into a bug on something that I'm not signed up for on their bug tracker, I don't necessarily have a huge motivation to go and report that bug when I'm being asked to create yet another account that will just continue to fill my email.
I definitely agree that there should be easier ways. Now, Popey has made some videos lately showing how simple it can be to report a bug. But when you get into different distributions and different desktop environments, and then it becomes a little more tedious because you have to figure out which one is for and everything else.
Mhm.
But I think it should be made easier.
I think software doing development on a common platform like GitLab helps. But if someone's running their own GitLab instance, there's not really any federation across these tools where we have these social media networks like we were talking about on Linux Unplugged earlier that have this federation like Mastodon,
Yep.
but we don't have these for bug trackers where it would be entirely useful for making these contributions to reporting these bugs where I don't have to sign up for 20 different instances.
Yep. Agreed. All right. So, what about software itself? Is there anything that you feel that would benefit Linux on a whole if it came to be available to install on Linux?
Certainly the big name suites, like we're talking Microsoft, we're talking Adobe. Something I would like to see to really help Linux in the workplace is I'd like to see effort made from Microsoft on helping better integrate Linux desktops into an Active Directory environment or a Windows work environment.
Yep.
Like, I run Ubuntu at work, and there are tools that we utilize to integrate it into the Active Directory environment. But it would be so much nicer if there was some kind of official support from Microsoft on that front.
Yep. You're not the first person to say that either. So, that is definitely something that we could use. What about how we market Linux, dude? Are we bad at marketing? We always talk about the year of the desktop. What about it? Or will we ever have it? Do we have it already?
I've been using Linux full time for like the last 6 years and off and on for the last 14 years. And for most of the time, it has felt like that the year of the Linux desktop is a joke. It is a meme. As for marketing, it's all in who we target. Are we really trying to target this mythical new user? Most people have gone on to using their cell phones or tablets. Just look at Apple's What is a Computer ad campaign, which they've just recently doubled down on with the new iPad Pro.
Yep.
Or Chromebooks. A lot of people are using Chromebooks. The Linux desktop is going to continue being a niche of a niche it's going to be a bigger part of that as the desktop and laptop market shrinks for most people. But that's really where we're going to be focusing on and that's what System 76 has shifted towards too. When you look at their marketing, they're going towards the creators.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, let me ask you a controversial question. Do we need to have a universal distro to market Linux? And I don't mean get rid of all distros other than that one. I just mean this is the one we say, this is Linux. If you're going to install Linux for the first time, this is it.
That's really hard. I think I'd have to disagree with that for a couple reasons. Like if I'm talking your average Joe user, then something Ubuntu based will probably work. Most guys are going to follow Ubuntu based distributions. But if we're talking the gaming demographic, if you look at Linus Tech Tips, you see distributions like the Ubuntu based Pop! OS get mentioned, but you also see Manjaro is heavily used by some of the Linus Tech Tips people when they're showcasing Linux because it is going to have the latest kernel. It's going to have the latest Mesa stack. It's going to have these latest components that are crucial for gamers to have if they're running the latest and greatest hardware that you might not have if you're running something Ubuntu based, especially if you're on an LTS.
Right.
So we have different distributions that fill different purposes. So I don't think there is that need for that one universal distribution to show to a new person. I go the route of asking them, what's your use case? And if you look at something like, is it Lightworks? It's one of these big professional video editors that officially recommends CentOS or something Red Hat based if you want to get official support from them, because it's just not going to work as well on Ubuntu or Arch or something like SUSE.
Yep. Well, that, like I said, it's a controversial question because you don't want to remove one of the greatest things about Linux, which is its flexibility and its openness and the fact that you can
Right.
change it and do what you want. But to market it to people who are not gamers, who are not technical, who are just wanting a computer and they just want to run it. I think there's something to say for that portion, to say, hey, here is what you would run if you did that. If you ran Linux, this is probably the best one for you.
Well, wouldn't that be up to the hardware manufacturers to make that decision? Like System 76 has their Pop! OS. You have the Pine 64 guys partnering with different distributions to ship as default or make available.
They partner with Manjaro.
Yeah, you have the KDE project partnering with people to have like the Ubuntu laptop. You have other x86 laptop partners that are making Manjaro laptops.
Yep.
So leave it up to the hardware vendors to make that decision.
Very good. It's a tough subject to talk about and come to a final answer. So yeah, very good. All right. If you could change one thing about Linux, Tyler, what would it be?
Ooh, that's I would really just keep promoting these universal package formats. I think that's going to remove the question of what distribution are you running. And I would also stop this argument between them. They're snaps and flat packs and app images. They can all coexist with each other. We don't need to pick one over the other. If someone wants to distribute their software as a snap, we shouldn't chastise for them for that. We should just be happy they're releasing software for Linux, because that means I can run that piece of software on any distribution that I can run snaps on. Or same thing goes for a software developer that chooses to release it as a flat pack or an app image.
Well, there's a deeper discussion to go into, and I don't know if we have time to go into that about working with companies. And again, it goes back to not picking one to say one is better and the other one should be gone, but picking one to promote so that you can go to these companies who will say to you when you go to them, will you make your product work on Linux? And they say, which one? Which Linux should we market it? Which one should we make it work for?
Well, and that makes me think of as of this time, a recent episode of Linux for Everyone where Alan Pope was speaking with Jason Evangelo, and Alan was going into where his job is to go talk to people to help them package their software on Linux. Now, he works as part of the Snapcraft team.
Mm-hmm.
So that's clearly where, that's his bias, but he also said he presents Flatpak as an option to these software development houses to say, hey, you could also release your piece of software as a Flatpak.
Yep.
So Alan's job again is to present snaps, but he presents both options to these software development houses.
I think the perfect scenario would be for every distribution to support both out of the box.
I agree. I don't like where we're in this world where a lot of these distributions where if I'm on Ubuntu, I have snaps, but I got to go in and add Flatpak support after the fact.
Right.
Or if I'm on something like Pop! OS or Elementary, I got the Flatpak support out of the box, but I got to add snap support in after the fact. I'd rather just have both out of the box. Like I think Manjaro has both out of the box.
I love the fact that they're, getting behind something and going with it. But for the end user's sake, I think it would be great if, and you find there isn't many out there. I don't know if Manjaro does both or not out of the box, but you'll find usually distros will pick one or the other. And I just think it would be great if they just did both and then be done with it.
Agreed. And I love in recent versions of GNOME software where you'll go in and you select, let's say, Telegram, and you have a drop down on the top right that'll let you select which source you want to install it from.
Yep.
So,
all right. So you told us why you chose to run Linux when you started. Why are you still choosing to run Linux today, dude?
I think it's still that freedom to make it my own, along with the community that goes with it. Like, there's not when you look at like Windows or Mac OS, you don't have the strong, passionate communities. Maybe with Mac OS, but you don't have the strong, passionate communities that go with them as you do on the Linux side.
Yep. Agreed. It's funny because I talk to different people and, barring one or two specific communities, like in Windows, there are no communities like in Linux. There just aren't. And that's why, I'll talk to somebody and they said, that's why I'm still running Linux, because there is no community like that over there. So, yeah, pretty awesome.
Yep.
All right. Anything else you want to share with people, dude?
Yeah, just be active within the community. Take part. Don't be afraid to take part if you're new. Jump in, say hi, share what you're passionate about, have a passionate discussion, just don't attack others. Find your local lug. If there isn't one, make one. And especially with the recent events, make it virtual. Have a virtual lug, even if it's something like Linux Unplugged or Biddle.
Yep.
Just take part.
Take the first step and be a part of the community. Yep. Awesome. All right. So if somebody wanted to contact you, how would they do that, Tyler?
I've got my Twitter account. It is at Condulo. That is also my username on Telegram.
Wait, stand by. We got to talk about, where did that username come from?
I don't really recall how I came up with it, but I remember way back when I was in middle school and still playing on Neopets, and I had that name created for some reason, and I just stuck with it as a username because it was unique. So I knew I could go to a website and use that and have it be available.
Very nice. Awesome. All right. Sorry I interrupted you. Go ahead. Tell people how they can get in contact with you.
So really the Twitter, Telegram, and Discord, same username on all three. Those are the main places where you can find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tyler, for sitting down with me. Thank you for the contributions that you make behind the scenes with testing things and reporting bugs. Appreciate it, man.
Yep, it's great to be with you today.
All right, that's going to wrap it up. Thank you all for joining us this week as we spotlight the best thing about Linux, our community. Until next time, long live Linux.